2017 became a $32.7 million drug trafficker. This motherfucker.
Of a mental breakdown. They had just spotted a DEA van stalking them in the woods because inside these kids' backpacks.
Come on, me no homies like this. Foxy, you trying to run up some money, bro?
These weren't your average high schoolers. These kids had a smuggling empire that had brought in 17,000 pounds of weed, and their parents would kill them if they ever found out. Undetected, the boys dropped to the floor to find a way around it. But Nate Norman, the leader of the group,
motherfucker say undetected.
Night vision goggles to get a closer look and began smirking at what he saw. These DEA agents they were so afraid of that could end everything that night. We're asleep in their van this entire time. And as the boys snuck by and made it home safely that night,
what? You know I don't watch movies.
Had just made the easiest money he'd ever made in his life.
I'll watch it. I'll watch it.
$1 million.
You know what I was thinking? I was thinking like end of the stream at nighttime. Like we should end the stream and just chill in the Discord and watch a movie or a show. And I'm gonna just do that in the nighttime. And then we'll just have more people in the Discord and shit too. You know what I mean? A little something before bed type shit. If you're there, you're there.
The biggest drug smugglers in the United States, invading the DEA, FBI,
yeah, no, that's
for years. They had
crazy.
17,000 pounds of
that's
weed,
crazy.
$32 million. But through jealousy, betrayals, and shady deals, their empires would fall apart before any of them.
6,000.
This is the true story of the new Now, Nate Norman wasn't exactly a criminal.
Nate Norman, why have I heard of this before?
Dropout working at Pizza Hut, living in his mom's basement. And
I'm trying to know a Nate Norman.
Organized crime was watching Scarface on cable because with no degree and a dead-end job, the
nugget porn. What the fuck is nugget porn?
For Nate Norman. Changed one day when Nate and his buddy Topher were smoking a J, flipping through Times magazine, and stumbled across a story that would change their lives forever. Canada had the best weed in the world, BC buds, and smuggling BC buds across the border? Oh, it's a $7 billion business. Wait a sec, Nate thought. Idaho's right next to the Canadian border. Now, while people knew Nate delivered pizzas around town, he also delivered sacks. Although Nate's prices were high and his bud quality sucked. But knowing that the best buds in the entire
this
world
motherfucker was trapping.
Oh, Nate could sell the hell out of it if he could just get his hands on it. So that's when he turned the Topher and said, we should become international drug smugglers. Now, while this idea of a criminal enterprise sounds great,
these guys are fucking smart for not dressing in no designer or nothing acting no. This guy's wearing the plaid shirt, bro.
A pound of weed costs money.
What? This guy said search it up later, bro. I don't want to search up nugget for it. What the fuck? I already know it's fucking some fucked up shit, bro. We can search it up right now, bro. We're gonna see exactly what the fuck this is. This guy said, I don't want to click any of these, to be honest. I don't want to click any of these. Don't search your shy stuff. I don't. It actually showed up fucking Pornhub shit. I don't want to.
Assuming that was enough to buy a pound of weed, the two head on to Canada with what was their life.
How do you know what it is?
But after coasting through the checkpoint, they quickly realized Canada was not what they thought it was. See, High Times made it seem like people sold pounds of weed on the side of the road, but it really just looked like the US, except kilometers. What the fuck? So empty-handed, after hours of searching for a vendor, the two head into a Canadian bar to at least make the trip worthwhile. Maybe Nate's plan was too ambitious, he thought. It almost seemed too easy. But old man Frankie, a regular at the bar, gestured at the two Americans sticking out like sore thumbs. As Nate and Topher walked over to him, they said, could you help us procure a pound of flowers? 1 pound? Frankie said he had dozens, of Canada's finest, but it was all back at his apartment. And while Nate and Topher tried to contain their excitement, thinking this was their big connect for BC buds, well, old man Frankie had just found his next victim. But inside his crappy apartment, the two realized Frankie actually seemed to.
I don't even want to know what you sent on this.
Where else were they gonna go? They were desperate. How much cash you got? Frankie said. For 1,400.
What the fuck? 6,000. What the fuck is?
But as Nate opened up the bag to get a whiff, what? Frankie told him that wouldn't be wise. I mean,
no limbs. What the fuck?
Wayne smelling or barely even looking at it. The two hand over what was their life savings to a sketchy grandpa they just met at a seedy Canadian bar. And with the pound of beef in hand, they began the hardest part now, trying to get home. Now, according to High Times,
What?
the Canadian border is 5 times longer than the
Nah,
Mexican,
fam.
but there's no fence. I mean, next thing you know, you crossed international lines. While
You guys are
thousands of smugglers
fucked.
hid weed in horse trailers, snowmobiles, sailboats, hollowed-out logs, hell, even underground tunnels. Hiking weed across the border was just the easiest, but also the riskiest. So the plan? Nate was gonna drive back home by himself, while Topher would smuggle their precious cargo, hiking 11 kilometers across the Canadian wilderness filled with bears by himself.
They hyped.
Hours later, with dirt on his face, Topher saw his first sign of American civilization. Outback Steakhouse, where there's no rules. It's just right. With Nate parked outside, Topher hopped in for a celebratory smoke of their freshly smuggled BC buds. It seemed like the plan had worked. It had all gone well. But after the first hit, something was off. This wasn't the creme de la creme BC buds. No, Frankie had sold them Mexican brickweed at BC bud prices. Or in other words, this should have been $400 a pound, not $1,400. Frankie had sold them buds that were grown in Mexico, smuggled into the US, smuggled into Canada, and then smuggled back down to the United States. And that's when they learned you can't trust anyone in the game, including the ancients.
Why would you trust a random old man? Like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy?
So bad they could actually still make money on this. They hit up his old friend Scuzz to have him sell it on the streets. And Scuzz was a connected dude. At 18 years old. Selling it to every hood rat in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Days later, Scuzz came back with $2,800, double what they had bought it for. And with his business model proven to work, Nate turned to Topher and said, High Times was right. Why doesn't everyone do this? Because according to their calculations, Nate and Topher were shocked to find out they could make $3 million in just 14 months by doubling their money with every smuggling run. And to them, that seemed like enough. Because with $3 million in hand, the two could buy homes, start a business, and leave the game while they were ahead. Because when drug dealers get caught, it's always because they get too greedy and give themselves away, but that wasn't going to be them. They promised to themselves no guns, no girls, nothing flashy. But little did they know that once you're in the game, there's no easy exits. Because while the rewards are great, the risks are even greater. With 1 pound became 2, became 4, became 8, and Nate was growing more comfortable driving thousands of dollars through the Canadian checkpoint, flashing a little disarming wave and a little lip smile. But today, as he coasted through the Canadian checkpoint driving the crest in Canada, Nate really thought about it. This was the ticket out for him. He didn't need college. Hell, with a few more smuggle runs, he could buy his mom a car, and if he found a good grower, Nate could make the big bucks. But then in his rearview mirror, he spotted those Canadian red and blue lights. Sirens grew louder. Nate Norman was getting pulled over by the cops. With American license plates, he knew he stuck out like a sore thumb. As the Mountie parked his car and stepped out, every step he took,
Mountie. Why do men think it's a Mountie?
He was. But as he rolled down his window,
it's a regular ass cop.
So, hey, you guys smuggling? Well, because you're not gonna get any flour going to Creston. It's a bunch of loggers. You need to go to Nelson. Don't speed. This is a little warning. Yeah. Getting let off the hook and even a tip on where to find the holy grail of BC buds, Nate was totally wrong. Canada was way different than the United States.
The fuck? The cop just told them?
Tourism, logging, hell, even maple syrup. In 2001, BC Buds was a $7 billion a year business in Canada, and Nelson was the capital of it. But why? Well, Canada had some of the most relaxed bud laws in the world at the time.
I generally feel there's a slightly more humanitarian government around here. It's not into putting people away for the rest of their life for their choice of herbs.
And hydroponic stores that sold tomato growing equipment sprawled all around the city, and the result was the golden age of BC buds that were sought all around the world. And for Nate, this is what High Times was talking about. So walking into several Canadian hydroponic
Yo, you ever think about just growing weed at the crib?
Real BC
because we can over here. We can grow a certain amount of plants.
Bring down serious weight to the United States. And for Nate, the money would begin pouring in, while millions of Americans were just baked out of their minds with cottonmouth. But not anymore. With today's sponsor, Arab. Arab ain't any other water bottle.
sponsored?
Completely new way
Nah,
of
you can't be.
It adds flavor to the water.
Can't be looking at.
I like this a lot, actually. So get yourself an Arab bottle.
It says most replayed because people all skip that.
Which one's your favorite?
Don't kill me.
Because I'm loving the raspberry lemon. On a typical run, Nate and Topher waited until dark and drove within a mile of the border.
spots.
Where Topher, dressed in all camo, would leap out and disappear into the trees. But instead of Nate driving the money over the border, Topher was carrying a hockey bag stuffed with cash for over 7 miles, would exchange with the growers directly in Canada, head back down to America. While back in the States, he would hand the bag off to Nate, who would hand it off to Scuzz, who would hand it off to hundreds of dealers. And for all of this, Topher made $1,000 with each run, while Nate by this point had pocketed over 150 grand, more money than he'd ever seen in his lifetime. You see, BC buds were in demand, and Nate's operation needed to expand. With serious money coming in,
Damn.
the boys got serious about their methods. Topher hired friends from high school to help him run since these hauls were too heavy for just one dude. By now, it was 6 Toyota 4Runners filled with runners that would head towards the border drop point where they would all change in the camo, slip out into the trees carrying hockey bags full of cash, up to 400 grand. Now, while months earlier they all said they wouldn't be flashy with their money, slowly they all began to get the things they had always wanted. 4-wheelers, jet skis, plasma screen TVs, mini disc players, whatever they got, it was the most expensive version of it. Scuzz moved out of his mom's basement and told her he was renting a little crappy apartment, but in reality, he bought a lakeside home. Nate began throwing elaborate lingerie parties, inviting half of the town nearly every other week. And while as the boss, Nate should have been—
oh, these guys fucking, yeah.
Loud. Well,
yeah.
Nate was actually
someone
the
snitched for
worst
sure.
offender. Nate bought himself an 8-bedroom mansion, several stash houses, an Escalade with 24-inch rims, diamond chains, Dom Perignon, Gadsden straps, and 8 balls of nose candy. And like most drug dealers,
oh, he's doing bear coke.
He would become a rapper, so he bought studio time with this drug money. But not all was wild. Nate had found a lovely girlfriend.
He was making tracks.
Church event.
Bam.
Just kidding. She was a stripper, and her name was Buffy. And Nate showered her with all of the jewelry, Gucci bags, trips to Cabo. And as foolish as it was to draw all of this attention to himself, Nate had just never been cool in his life. He just couldn't.
Fact, they're using the worst pics of him.
Friends used to call him the Keebler elf growing up. Those same friends were now working for Nate. But when Nate's mom asked him where he was getting all of this cash from, well, he told her it was his snowplow business. And then bought her a lakeside home, and she never asked again. You see, Nate had been a—
you ain't plowing nothing.
But he learned that the only get-rich-quick scheme that actually works in this world is
the movie Kid
drugs.
Cannabis, I gotta watch it. I gotta watch it.
A year
This
later,
is crazy.
the crew had swelled to 32 people, and they're moving thousands of pounds all over the country. Nate's janky operation—
all through one route?
transformed into a well-oiled machine. But even then, they still had problems. One night, the runners walked into DEA agents sleeping in their truck in the forest. On a 14-below winter night, they'd lost sight of the trail and nearly froze to death in the dark. Now, the drive home was arguably the riskiest part of the entire run. So Nate began rigging all of the 4Runners with explosives, so if they ever got pulled over by the American cops, they could just set the weed on fire. You see, the stakes were high because getting caught now meant a couple years in prison. I mean, this is 2002 after all. But to calm the runners' anxiety over moving thousands of pounds of buds across the country committing federal felonies, Nate Pinky promised them that if they ever were arrested, just give him a call from the jail, he would pay for their bail and their attorneys, and it would all be good. But Topher grew nervous with this flashy lifestyle and growing operation. He begged Nate to get out of the game, but Nate joked he would never stop until the cops got him, because in his mind, he could just pay for the best attorneys to get him out. So why not go hard? Because that $3 million goal, nah, that's what Nate now
per
makes
month.
a month. So to shut Topher up, he raised his pay to $8,000 a run, locking his best friend, the guy that had helped him start this entire thing, in golden handcuffs.
Damn.
The Topher's fears almost came true when a fight broke out over a girl at a 150-person party the crew was hosting. One of Nate's dealers shot a gun in the air to break up the fight, but nobody even heard it. So Nate, plastered as hell, shot off a .45 Magnum into the house. The crowd began screaming, everyone scattered, the neighbors called the cops, cars sped off and crashed into the fences, and Scuzz got pulled over on his way home with 20 grand in his pocket. Nearly
Jesus.
the cops, they let him go. And then the next night, they threw another party at the same house, equally as crazy.
The next night?
They were rich. They were cool.
The next night is fucked, bro. Nate's a fucking idiot for real, yo.
In Nate's eyes, nobody had gotten hurt. Nobody had gotten caught. Maybe this could just
W, welcome, F-Sam. Welcome.
It's a frantic call. Scuzz
who wanna press the hammer on him? Who wanna press the hammer?
And wanted to know where was the cash and or else one of the burglars, Giovanni, was gonna chop his finger off. Now, for Scuzz, handing them 40 grand in cash and a couple pounds in buds wasn't the end of the world, but Nate had seriously ruffled someone's feathers because they knew not just what they were up to.
Sometimes you think it's fucking gonna be someone to join us in the community.
Nate Norman wasn't the only teenager in Idaho,
and it's just a motherfucker like that.
Smuggling in BC buds. Nicknamed Wang, he was born in Korea and adopted by insurance executives in Idaho. And Wang had grown up with the Prince life. He played the violin, honorable student, but
that's what Foxy would do when I would put portals down in Portal 2. I'd put the portal and put it somewhere else, and Foxy would be like, portal, it's the same spot. He'd be like, no. And I'd be in it already, and he'd make me die, bro.
So Wang began running his own wildly successful bud smuggling operation, transforming from the Kumon
I've had the man again.
into a wankster driving an Eldorado lowrider, popping oxys and snorting all day long. In many ways, Wang was was a lot like Nate, a nerdy teen who just grew into a drug kingpin, but he was also...
What's with the
Nate's
SpongeBob
polar opposite.
shirts?
You see, Wang wasn't satisfied in pulling in millions with his friends. Hell no. He wanted the whole market. Now, Nate knew of Wang and other dealers in town, but figured there was so much money
Fuck
in the
it, we
game
just get in
that
the game,
everyone
guys?
would be good.
I'm joking.
No, Wang's thriving business had been falling apart since Nate's arrival, and Wang was growing desperate to gain back his market share. Sniffling his nose after racking a couple lines, Wang called up his old roommate Giovanni for a little job proposal, a hit job, to take out Nate Norman, promising to pay $100,000 for the job with a $5,000 down payment up front that he would get him later. Giovanni, a dude who had never committed a crime in his life, said why not? So Giovanni called his friends and headed to the Kmart to buy supplies for the hit job. A tarp, gloves, windbreakers. Wang gave him a couple handguns and for good measure, a knife as well, since Giovanni thought, well, you can't have fingerprints if you don't have fingers. Now Wang figured it'd be a really simple job. To exonerate himself on the night of the hit, he threw himself an alibi party to be seen by as many people as not murdering Nate. But instead of Giovanni doing the hit that night, they broke in the Scuz's apartment, stealing the pounds of bud and $40K in cash, because Giovanni still hadn't received that $5,000 down payment yet. So we thought, why not make some extra money robbing Nate's crew first and then murdering Nate? Makes sense.
Crazy.
Now, when Nate heard about Scuz's robbery, he figured it was the cartel or maybe some other gangbangers in town, but he didn't even realize he was in a turf war with the only other nerdy kingpin in town, Wang. And for the first time, Nate was truly spooked. He moved out of his house. He rented another one across town. He started sleeping with the loaded handgun under his pillow. And Nate would try to lay low the rest of that summer, moving in with Buffy. But after breaking both of his arms flipping over his dirt bike, Nate developed a serious addiction to painkillers. And even worse, Buffy couldn't even take care of him because she had gotten a boob job. Nate was living in fear.
No, Buffy with the boob job?
His girlfriend had really...
This is crazy. This is really a movie right now. This is really a fucking...
13,
who are these guys?
A lumberjack discovers a murdered boy in the
Oh
forest.
my
The police
god.
identify the boy as Brendan Butler. Brendan's
Chris
parents
loves
were in
titties.
shock. They told the cops he had played the violin. He was an honor roll student, a traditional good boy. I mean, who the hell would end his life? But digging further, the cops discovered Brendan Butler lived a double life. Under the nickname of Wang, he was a big-time dealer distributing buds all over the United States, and that his #1 business rival was Nate Norman.
Cops found the fucking history, bro.
Wang's death, Nate told his crew, who was questioning him about it, that he had no involvement in it. But I mean, who really knew at this point?
This is what they mean.
Transformed from a pizza delivery driver living in his mom's basement to a kingpin with a smuggling empire that even the cartel was jealous of. It just didn't seem out of the question that Nate could be involved, but Nate was having bigger problems to fry. Now that month, some of Nate's dealers got picked up by the cops who found cash, drugs, and guns on him. Now from jail, the dealers took their customary one phone call, and that's when the cops heard them saying, "Tell Nate, I'm in jail." The DEA, the FBI, and Homeland Security now knew that Nate Norman was the guy behind this entire operation. But what happened to Wang, or Brendan Butler? Now you see, Wang
Now, why are
had
you using
no
your
idea
Govey,
his own
bro?
hitmen were pissed off at him. He was so coked out and on drugs, he literally forgot he owed them money. So withholding that $5,000 for months, Wang took Giovanni and his crew to the forest where he wanted Nate's body to be buried when the murder was done. Now there, Giovanni asked him again for the down payment. Wang said, "Don't worry about it, bro." Giovanni got pissed. Wang told him to chill out. Giovanni grabbed Wang by the neck, squeezing harder and harder. Wang, hardly able to talk, begged for his life. But Giovanni did not know how to stop what he had started. Choking Wang to death, Gio slashed his throat to hide the fingerprints, took the cash on him, and left Wang's body on the exact spot that Nate's body was supposed to be buried. But now with the body being found,
Crazy
the murder,
karma.
the fingers, and the money, Nate knew it was probably time to step out of the game. Now, with the heat on Nate's crew thinking that he could be responsible for Wang's murder, all of the runners would meet at a stash house at dawn to pack up all of their things and skip out of town. But instead, when they got there, they kicked around, smoking weed, reminiscing on the good times. And then right then and there, across 4 states, serving 6 warrants, the FBI arrested runners, managers, dealers, everyone, except for Nate Norman. You see, while the cops had been tracking Nate Norman...
Did Nate snitch?
Wang's murder, somehow he had outwitted the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security for months, the same way he had avoided Giovanni. But without Nate there to pay off his crew's bail and all of their attorney fees, one by one, they all began to rat out Nate Norman and reveal the entire operation. But once Nate heard the feds had turned the crew on one another and told them all they were all going to go to jail for a very long time unless they got everyone, Nate Norman walked into the police station and the cops could not believe their eyes. They were expecting a hardened criminal mastermind, but
Not that girl that slept with everybody.
And while the feds estimated 2,500 pounds were smuggled in reality, they moved over 17,000 pounds of weed over the border, netting them $32 million.
Jesus.
Barely out of their teens, these kids had embarrassed the United States government, and somebody was going to take the fall. Giovanni was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Brendan Butler. Scuzz and Topher were given 2 years in the slammer, and Nate Norman would get 12 years. And a sick twist of fate, had it not went down the way it did, Nate probably wouldn't be alive. Today,
12 years is not bad.
Out of prison.
Tell me doesn't have money waiting for him?
It seems like life for him is doing good.
It's crazy. That was probably one of like a really good video. I haven't seen a video that good in so long. Yo, Nate was on some shit. Yo, that's crazy. That's crazy. WVid for real.